Um, let's start out by saying that we revere those who came before us. This ground has been hallowed by the countless dedicatory prayers that have been offered, dedicating this ground as a final resting place, by the tears which have been shed here. This particular spot is of interest. You see the big Weech headstone. That's not actually anybody's headstone. It's just a marker for this lot. Right behind it is the headstone for David Henry Weech. His parents were Hiram and Sarah Weech, who were in the first company who came here to settle. Buried on one side, on the south side of him, is Estelle Weech, his first wife, who died in the flu epidemic of 1918, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. On the other side is his second wife, Hannah Mae Allen. With each of those wives, he had 8 children. His first wife died when he was 43 years old. He married another wife who was 21, 22 at the time, and had 8 more children. To me, that is an act of faith. And a man at that stage of life would marry again and have 8 more children. Everybody told Grandma Weech when she married him, he's going to die and leave you with a bunch of kids. Well, he didn't. They buried him on the 17th birthday of the youngest child, who was Davida. So he stayed with her all those years. It was a different world there back then. I've heard it said that we should, how does it go? We are visitors in the past, and those that lived in the past, it tells us not to be ugly tourists. It's like visiting a foreign country when we visit the past. And we shouldn't be ugly tourists. We shouldn't be making judgments about those people and what they did and how they lived then. It was a different world, and we should respect that. Some time ago, I think Rawdale found it in the somewhere in the church when it was being remodeled, the old Relief Society scrapbook.
Yes.
Where did you find that?
Up in the attic.
Which building?
The old Pima Chapel. The new addition was added in '54. Above the kitchen and the restrooms.
I don't know how it got up there, but I'm grateful that it was preserved. I have here a copy of some of the writings. They tried to recount every Relief Society president that had been in Pima since they first arrived. And each of them had a section, and the ones that were still alive wrote of their experience. This happened somewhere in the mid-40s. So many of the Relief Society presidents had passed and gone on. But this is, these are the words of Clarissa Norton, who was the president in 1903. She said, during all those years in office, the only way we had of travel was either to walk or to use a wagon or buggy drawn by horses. The roads were all unimproved. That means this is actually an improved road because it's got some gravel on it, some drainage. The roads were all unimproved. When it rained, the roads were so muddy they were almost impassable. And when it was dry, they were so rough and dusty we could hardly see our way at times. And she says they had to go to Thatcher once a month for union meeting on these old kind of roads. During this period, there were no telephone to simplify our duties. If there was sickness to visit or a message to deliver, we had to walk, often as far as 2 or 3 miles. So if you're doing your ministering now, I would like you to remember these women, these sisters. She was very proud of her sisters in the Relief Society. She said we were a valiant band of women. Now there's this a particular time that I want to focus on. These words come from Sister Eyring, who was the president after Clarissa Norton, and she was one of her counselors, so she was involved. I don't think we appreciate or understand how difficult the times were during the flu epidemic, 1918, 1919, 1920. Because this was before there were many vaccines to protect people from the many diseases. Our water supply was very poor and often contaminated. The people suffered with typhoid, malaria, measles, whooping cough, and other contagious diseases. Most dreadful was the epidemic of flus. Several times during the epidemic, there were as many as 3 funerals in a day. And so many were ill you could hardly get a nurse or a doctor. Everyone who could help was brought into service. At that time, Pima was probably about 700 people. And she says that in a very few years, she said they laid out, which was their term for getting somebody ready for burial, 138 people in just a few years in a town of 700. Can you imagine? She talked about how they would go into the homes to try and help the people that were sick. And they would stay anywhere from 2 to 10 days in the home, sometimes as long as 2 weeks. Some of the homes they would go into, there was not anybody well enough to even give another person a drink. I know there's a lot of feelings about vaccines today. And every time I hear somebody talk like that, I think they don't understand. They don't appreciate what a blessing these vaccines were to these people, because they were able to avoid, for the most part, most of these dreadful, terrible diseases. I remember as a young boy in the early 1960s, polio was still going around. They had just barely developed a vaccine. It was actually I think we took it on a sugar cube, didn't we?
It started out as a Salk vaccine.
A Salk vaccine. But there was a girl in my class who had suffered from polio and was crippled. And so a lot of the other diseases we were vaccinated for by that time.
You knew Reese Jarvis, who was a postmaster. That's what crippled him.
I remember growing up watching him move around, and he always moved with kind of a limp.
Had a bad leg.
But that was, and I think he was told he would never walk again. Sometimes the polio would affect their breathing, so they couldn't breathe, and they'd put him inside an iron lung that would breathe for them. It would suck the air out. Their head would be outside of the chamber, and they'd suck the air out, and so their lungs would expand, and it would cause them to breathe. That's how they breathed. And then they would let the pressure back in, and it would expel the air. David Weech was a pioneer in Pima. He started the first water system, the first electric, the first telephone. What else?
Bank.
What?
Bank.
The bank. He sold those things and made a fortune. Started the bank, lent the money out to farmers that were providing during World War I to the mine. And then when the war ended and the supply went away, the demand went away, the farmers went bankrupt and so did the bank. He was left nearly penniless and had to start over. Not very long after that, well, his wife was one of those who died in the flu epidemic. She died on October 30th, 1918. So he'd buried his wife, he'd lost his fortune, and he had children at home still to raise. I can't.
Did Lenola die during the epidemic?
Lenola died
The
in
only daughter?
1914. She died at 8 years old.
Okay.
This was their only daughter, and she died in 1914. Buried over here is Estelle's youngest son, Irvin. No, I'm sorry, he's here.
I think he said the electric cookies that left the water.
This is Lanier. She had one child who was handicapped and ended up in the state hospital for most of his life when he got old enough that she couldn't handle him anymore. This is Weech, her son Lanier. I didn't even know he existed until I was about 10 years old, and my mom said, when you come home from school, put on some nice clothes and come over to Grandma's. I said, why? She said, because we're going to have a funeral for your Uncle Lanier. I said, who? I didn't even know he existed. He was one of the 8. Anyway, I hope you've learned something. I hope you appreciate and will search your ancestors and learn where you came from. Thank you.